Hi, my name is Jagdish Borah, and I am a faculty member in the Department of Social Work and Management at Assam Downtown University, Guwahati. My specialization is human resource management, and I am glad to be here today to take you through the subject of organizational behavior. Today, I shall be discussing the second part of our topic on historical background of OB, starting from the human relations movement to the present. As we saw in the earlier lesson, the Industrial Revolution, which was a transition from the agrarian society to an industrial society, brought about greatly expanded mass production of goods, which also changed the way of life of people and also new questions of improving productivity. Since all the industries were newly set up and people were not very aware of how to run these industries. During this period in the 1880s, the scientific management approach came with the pioneering effect, a pioneering work of Frederick Taylor, who applied scientific principles to how workers should work. He used scientific methods of doing or the workers doing a work instead of haphazard methods of working. This approach of his caught the attention of other consultants, management consultants, and philosophers, and many of them supported his views and added to the movement, which was called the scientific management movement. But over a period of time, scientific management came in for criticism that greater importance was given to technology and workers were not treated as human beings because the focus was on how the work should be done, what technology should be used by the worker, how each step of work has to be followed by the worker as directed by his supervisor. So, the employee did not feel like a human being, he felt just like a tool to be used by his bosses. Now, in the 1930s, the human side of organization came into the limelight. When we say the human side of organization, we mean that the importance of the human being or the employee as a human being, that he was a human being with feelings and emotions, came into the limelight. And largely, this was a result of the Hawthorne Studies, which was a large research program at a company called the Western Electric Company, and they had a factory in a place called Hawthorne near Chicago, and therefore these studies came to be known as the Hawthorne Studies. And the main researcher was a psychologist called Elton Mayo, who was a professor of Harvard Business School. His pioneering work there helped to lay the foundation of the human relations movement. Now, the Hawthorne Studies started off as an experiment by the people in the factory to study the effect of illumination or lighting in a room. So they set up a room with the workers there, mainly they were women workers, and they studied from the engineering point of view what was the optimum amount of light that was required to achieve maximum production in what these women were doing. Now, so they slowly they kept increasing the light or the power of the bulbs. They increased the illumination in the room, and they saw that the production kept going up when the lighting increased or the illumination increased. That was normal. But surprisingly, when the lighting was decreased also to a very low point, when the illumination came down, then also the productivity was going up, production was going up. So this was very surprising. At that point of time, the factory management, they approached Elton Mayo, who was a well-known psychologist, industrial psychologist at the Harvard Business School, and he and his associates came to study this. And when they found that this was interesting, they went on to various other experiments also from 1927 to 1932. So through these various experiments, not only on lighting now, but on other experiments also, they concluded that people were responding to the social environment. People were responding to the fact that they were being recognized, that the experimenters were talking to them, asking them questions. So they felt good. They felt like human beings. And the conclusion was that job satisfaction and output depended more on cooperation of the employees, and a feeling of worth was very necessary. So the feeling of worth, self-esteem, recognition, these were the factors which led to the productivity, and not to extraneous factor like illumination or lighting or whatever. So management and owners realized the importance of treating workers as human beings, and therefore this period became known as the human relations movement, where there was concern for the sentiments and attitudes of people. Thereafter, the focus was on the employee as a human being. So earlier, during the scientific era, we saw that the human being was not the main concern. The technique of working or method of working was the concern. In this human relations movement, the focus was laid on the employee as a human being. And during this period, various psychologists started giving emphasis and studied the behavior in the workplace. So here again, these psychologists, they realized the importance of human behavior at work, and they began to study this behavior. Out of that, though there were various people involved, one was a German psychologist called Hugo Münsterberg, and he was one of the pioneers in the field of using psychology in industrial management, which today is called industrial psychology. And in 1913, he published a book, Psychology and Industrial Efficiency. So the focus was shifting from new industries, industrialization, to the scientific management, and then focus came to the human being and human behavior, which is what we study in organization behavior. During that period also, there was an American social worker called Mary Parker Foley, who wrote about the importance of treating people with respect and dignity in the workplace. In the 40s, 50s, and 60s, psychologists kept on working and studying human behavior and motivation, amongst other emotions and factors of the human being. And there were psychologists like Abraham Maslow, Douglas McGregor, Frederick Herzberg, amongst others, who propounded theories on motivation at workplace. We shall be studying the theories of motivation of these gentlemen in our future lessons. So, kindly note the shift which was taking place over a period of time from the 1880s scientific movement, and then human relations movement, and then from human relations movement, the emphasis on human beings and the study of psychology. So this importance of psychology in the workplace became more important, and emphasis was laid on the psychological aspect of the human being. Thus, organizational behavior began to emerge as a separate field of study, as we have learned earlier, that it relies heavily on topics from psychology and industrial psychology and social psychology. So this was the foundation of organization behavior. So we have seen how organizational behavior began to emerge as a field of study with the beginning of industrialization, and people with insufficient knowledge of human beings at work, with the scientific era, and through various studies and research, beginning to understand the people at work and why they behave as they do. As we come to the end of today's lesson, I would advise you to study the topic in greater detail from any of the textbooks prescribed in the syllabus and expand the material in writing. I look forward to seeing you in the next session.